Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke. The Enigmatic Arrival. The chapter opens with Stormgren, the Secretary General of the United Nations, sitting in his office, gazing at the night sky. He's waiting for his nightly communication with Corellin, the supervisor of Earth from the Overlords. The room is filled with tension and anticipation. "Good evening, Mr. Secretary General." Corellin's voice booms through the speaker, formal yet somehow warm. Good evening, Corellin, Stormgren replies, trying to sound confident. "I've been thinking about our discussions on humanity's progress." "Yes?" Corellin prompts, a hint of curiosity in his tone. Stormgren leans forward, his voice earnest. "I understand the peace you've brought us, but people are wondering, when will we get to see you? To truly know you?" Corellin's reply comes after a pause, thoughtful and measured. "In due time, Mr. Stormgren. Our appearance might be unsettling for humans. We're preparing you for that day, ensuring it will be a moment of understanding, not fear." Stormgren nods, though he knows Corellin can't see him. "And what about our autonomy? Will we always be under your guidance?" "There's a path you must walk, but it's one we cannot tread. Your destiny is your own, but we'll help you reach it," Corellin assures him. The conversation shifts as Stormgren brings up the Freedom League, a group resistant to the Overlord's control. They fear we're losing our identity, our culture. "Change is often feared, Mr. Stormgren, but it's also the cradle of evolution. Your culture, your beliefs. They are seeds that will grow in ways you cannot yet imagine," Corellin explains. As the communication ends, Stormgren sits back, a mix of emotions swirling within him. He's the bridge between two worlds, carrying the weight of humanity's hopes and the Overlord's enigmatic plans. The chapter closes with him pondering the future, the stars above mirroring the uncertainty and potential that lie ahead. The Unseen Hand. In New Athens, as twilight embraced the city, Peter van Rieberg, recently appointed as the acting Secretary General in the wake of Stormgren's disappearance, was immersed in a sea of reports. The weight of his new responsibility was evident as he sifted through the latest Overlord's communiques. A young aide interrupted his concentration with urgent news of another message from Corellin, signaling a progression in their enigmatic agenda. At a vibrant cafe, George Gregson convened with artists, including a holographic sculptor who unveiled a piece that defied the Overlord's imposed aesthetics. Their spirited debate centered not just on the suppression of art, but on the essence of human identity. In an abandoned subway station now repurposed as the Freedom League's headquarters, the director rallied the members with a passionate call to reclaim their autonomy from the Overlord's subtle dominion. Jan Rodrix, harboring a relentless curiosity about the Overlord's homeworld, covertly boarded a supply vessel. His determination to unearth their secrets was fueled by a conviction that the key to humanity's true liberation lay beyond the stars. Stormgren, having eluded his captors, confronted Corellin in a fortified chamber at the United Nations. The Overlord assured him of their benevolent intentions, yet a veil of secrecy remained, hinting at revelations that would soon test the human spirit. As darkness settled, the inhabitants of New Athens remained oblivious to the intricate dance of power and destiny unfolding around them, guided by the Overlord's unseen hand toward an enigmatic future. The Party of Revelations. The grand hall of Rupert Boyce's residence, with its exotic tapestries and paintings, held a large table at the center, covered with a velvet cloth and an array of curious instruments and gadgets. George Gregson found himself amidst a crowd, his gaze often drifting towards Jean, whose fascination with the overlords had brought them to this gathering. "Jean, do you really believe in all this?" George asked. Before George could respond to her look, a hush fell over the room as Rupert stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we delve into the unknown. With the overlords watching over us, let's see if we can uncover some truths of our own." The guests gathered around the table as Rupert presented his seance setup. The planchette began to move, spelling out messages that left some guests murmuring in awe and others, like George, in quiet disbelief. Suddenly, Jean swayed, her face pale. George caught her as she fainted. "Jean," he exclaimed, "what happened?" As she recovered, Jean whispered, "I felt something, a presence." George looked around, his eyes meeting Rashavarak, the overlord observer whose gaze seemed to hold answers. The evening progressed, and Rupert's experiment concluded with guests discussing the night's events. George sat beside Jean, his skepticism softened. "Jean, I want to understand," George said. "Tell me everything." Jean smiled. "It's a long story, George, but we have all night." The questions that had lingered began to find their shape as the guests discussed the overlord's plans and the future of humanity. George and Jean knew that their journey of discovery and challenge was just beginning. The Skeptic's Dilemma. Jean gave George a reassuring smile as they joined their friends around the table. The plate began to move on its own, sliding across the table, spelling out, "I am a Lulche." The message's meaning was unclear, but it captivated everyone's attention. The room fell silent, the only sound being the soft scraping of the plate. The seance ended, and George, feeling a profound connection with Jean, decided it was time to commit to their future together. "Jean," he said confidently, "I want us to sign that contract. 5 years. Let's do it." Her eyes shining, Jean agreed, and they left the seance, hand in hand, with a sense of unity and readiness to face the future, whatever it may hold. Walking home under the stars, George embraced the vast mysteries of the universe and the depth of the human heart. The Covert Odyssey. Jan Roderick stood alone in the Overlord ship's cargo hold, embarking on a mission to uncover the secrets of the Overlords and see their home planet. The thrill of the unknown propelled him, despite the fear of being discovered. As the star drive powered the ship, Jan felt the gravity of his decision to leave Earth and pursue the star's call. The ship lurched, and Jan steadied himself, gripping a crate. He was en route to the Overlord's home, with no possibility of return. He identified with George Gregson, the artist who defied the Overlord's cultural dominance. Like George, Jan was fighting for humanity's right to curiosity, creation, and exploration. Jan used a small device to send a brief message back to Earth, confirming his successful boarding and his journey towards the stars. With the message sent, he stowed the device and let his mind drift to the Overlord's planet, the revelations it held, and the new era for humanity he hoped to initiate. The journey's length and its end were unknown, but Jan was committed to this covert odyssey, prepared to encounter whatever the future held. The dawning of a new era. In the quiet town of New Athens, life was about to change in ways no one could have imagined. George Gregson and his wife Jean had always known their children were special, but the true extent of their uniqueness was only just beginning to reveal itself. One evening, as the family gathered in the living room, their son Jeff suddenly looked up from his book. "Mom, Dad," he said, "I need to tell you something important." George and Jean exchanged a glance before turning their attention to Jeff. "What is it, son?" George asked. Jeff took a deep breath. "I've been having dreams. They're different, and I think they're important." Jean's heart raced. "Can you tell us more, Jeff?" Before Jeff could answer, their daughter Jennifer spoke up. When Jeff has these dreams, I feel something too. The room fell silent as they considered the implications. It was then that a voice filled the space, not with a presence, but as if from within their own minds. "It is time for you to understand," said Karelin, the supervisor of the overlords. "Karelin?" Jean exclaimed. "What does this mean?" "Their abilities are signs of change," Karelin's voice conveyed. "A change that will affect all of mankind." George found himself pondering the possibilities. What does this change entail? "It signifies a new chapter for humanity," the voice of Karelin imparted. "A chapter where your children will play a significant role." Jean's eyes filled with tears. "And what of us, and the rest of humanity?" "You will see the changes unfold, and your role is to support your children," the voice assured. As they absorbed this revelation, the Gregson family understood that their lives were taking a turn toward the extraordinary. With the unseen guidance of the overlords, Jeff and Jennifer were poised on the brink of an exhilarating yet uncertain future. The final chapter. The world had changed. The once bustling cities of Earth were silent, the skies darkened not by clouds, but by the departure of the overlords. Jan Roderick's, a symbol of humanity's enduring spirit, walked through the empty streets, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He remembered the days when the overlords first arrived, the awe and fear they inspired. Now, watching their ships vanish into the stars, he felt a complex mix of emotions. A sense of loss for the familiar past, yet a burgeoning hope for humanity's new form. Making his way to the observatory, Jan reflected on the countless hours spent gazing into the cosmos, seeking answers that now seemed trivial in the face of humanity's transformation. The telescope, once his window to the universe, now stood as a relic of a bygone era. In the quiet of the observatory, Jan felt a connection, a whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. It was Rashavarek, the overlord who had guided him, speaking through the technology that connected their minds. "Jan, you have witnessed the end of one journey and the beginning of another," Rashavarek said, his voice resonating with a depth that was more than sound. "I have so many questions," Jan replied, his voice steady with newfound understanding. "Why did you come to us? What was the purpose of all this?" "The purpose, Jan, was evolution," Rashavarek explained. "Humanity had reached the precipice of its potential, and we were here to help you take the next step. The overmind, the collective consciousness of which we are a part, is always expanding, always growing. Your race has now joined that eternal journey." Jan thought of those who had transcended, their individuality merging with the overmind, contributing to a consciousness that spans the stars, no longer bound by time or space. "And what of the overlords? What will you do now?" Jan asked, his curiosity tempered by acceptance. "Our journey continues," the overlord replied, leaving unsaid their role as guides, a detail Jan already understood. A sense of peace settled over Jan Tata. The questions that had once tormented him now seemed to have answers, or perhaps they no longer mattered. He was a witness to humanity's legacy, a story that had spanned millennia die on. As the last light of the overlord's departure faded, Jan turned his gaze upward. The stars twinkled back at him, a tapestry of possibilities. He realized that while the story of humanity as he knew it had ended, the story of the universe was just beginning. And with that thought, Jan Roderick smiled. For in the end, it was not a story of loss, but one of transformation and hope. The legacy of humanity would live on, not on the pages of history, but in the vast, uncharted expanse of the cosmos. The legacy of the overlords. The world had changed. The once bustling cities and verdant forests were now silent, the skies empty of birds, the rivers still. Jan Roderick stood alone, the last witness to what had been. Jan looked around at the silent figures, their consciousness part of something greater. And those who remain, he pondered. They are the echoes of what was, came the faint whisper on the wind. In time they too will join what you call the Overmind. Jan stood, his gaze lifting to the stars. And Earth? He asked softly. Earth has played its part. Now it rests, a testament to the journey of its children, the voice replied. With that, Kirellin's presence faded, leaving Jan alone with the legacy of humanity. A planet silent yet filled with the whispers of a collective consciousness that had moved beyond the stars.